Unique occupations. In this video, we'll cover some unique occupations that might pique your interest or just completely wear you out. Like, how can some people actually make a living doing these things? If you want to find your ideal vocation, hobby, or occupation, subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you know whenever a new video is uploaded. Also, if you like this video, remember to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Are you just generally curious about occupations in general? Or do you wonder what else you could be doing out there to make a living? Either way, by the end of this video, you'll have a few ideas that you might want to try out yourself. So first things first, what do we mean when we say unique? When we talk about unique, usually we think of one of a kind, something that's rare, something that doesn't happen too often. That will mean that we will go for occupations that are unusual, things that fewer people do relative to the general population. However, there is a problem with that. We could cover occupations that have few people doing them, but at the same time are very at the forefront of our minds. To give you an example, very few people are actually astronauts. But I bet every single one of the people watching this video, or most of us, have known what an astronaut is ever since we were in kindergarten, right? Like if you want to go to space, you want to explore space, you want to see the moon, you want to do the test, get in a rocket and do all that stuff. Doing that in real life, it's much more difficult. And there are very, very, very few spots for that. So this is a very unique, very unusual occupation in the sense of the word of very few people actually do it. But a lot of people know what it is. So making a list out of that wouldn't be as entertaining or interesting. So we're going to not take into account occupations like those. Another possibility might be some performance art like acting or singing, right? Like maybe it's commonplace in the sense that you know people that do that, but to actually make a living off of it, relative to the general population, when you compare it to occupations like accounting, bookkeeping, marketing, and all the other sort of like normal jargon and stuff like that, these are much more unusual, if that makes sense. So we're not gonna cover those either because most of the people watching this already probably watch series or movies that they like, and they do it very often. So we're very used and accustomed to seeing actors and actresses, even though it's not the most common profession out there. So we're not going to cover that either. So for the purposes of this video, what are the occupations that we're going to cover and we're going to label as unique? Well, we're going to go with some occupations that are unusual, that not that many people do, but at the same time that they're not super mainstream, right? So the idea is that you'll get at least a few that you haven't heard of before, or that you might think, oh, well, that sounds interesting. Maybe you've seen or heard of most of them or even all of them, but if that's the case, that's great. But chances are you personally don't know that many people who actually do these. So without further ado, let's start. Number 1, professional bridesmaids, companions, buddies, and any other kind of companionship services. This might surprise some of you, but people are willing to pay strangers to accompany them or to help them at special events. So for example, if you're getting married and you are one bridesmaid short, or you need someone to help with some aspects of the wedding itself, you might actually hire someone who's a professional at doing these kinds of things. Someone who will behave in a way that's correct, someone who will be able to be in the wedding, in the event, and basically act like someone who was invited to it, someone who's okay to talk to, someone who's not going to make you embarrassed, someone who's going to actually potentially help you with many of the things that happen in the backstage in terms of work that needs to be done. That's something that can be done. Or if you have to go to an event, maybe you are an executive who's flying around all the time, maybe you are single or whatever, but you need to bring a companion, or that will create a good effect. Let's say that you're in a different country, or you're doing a business deal or something. You might hire the services of a professional person that's a companion or a body who can actually go with you. You can also potentially hire someone as a chaperone, someone who's a professional that works doing those sorts of things, to go with maybe a loved one who's going to an event or is going abroad in a kind of in an event that you won't personally be able to attend, and you would like them to be well taken care of, for example. There are many kinds of companionship services, but many of them can just be like the normal platonic professional kind of service that fall within this range. This will obviously be more of a freelance thing in the case of like having to have multiple clients and not necessarily have one specific kind of like job. But depending on the case, you might actually have agencies out there who can actually hire you out and help you with the process of finding clients, although of course you will have to pay a fee for that. And that takes us to number 2, cartographers. What is a cartographer? Well, a cartographer is someone who works with maps, someone who designs maps so that they can be more easily understood and so they can be, depending on what you're trying to use them for, more accurate and more useful for the people who are going to use the map of the geography that's going to be visited or seen. So basically, this is something that was very used throughout the whole span of the history of the human history race, right? Since people could like put things down on paper. Okay, so if we're going to go in and see this new land, or if we're going back somewhere, we need a map so that we know the roads that we're going to travel. In today's day and age, I mean, you wouldn't think that it's just like an old map, but like even services like Google Maps, they need people who can design them well, who can create the right kind of scale, people who can update the maps every so often when new things occur, because as time goes on, things change. So that is something that cartographer does. If this sounds like something that you might be interested in, you might want to research a little bit more about that and get yourself, I don't know, perhaps certified or research a little bit more about how you can learn it if you haven't learned that already, and then potentially see, okay, so what kind of jobs are there when it comes to this. Number 3, glass blower or glassmith. Basically, if you are someone who is an artisan and you can develop that skill set as you go, of creating adornments or even useful items like, I don't know, chemistry sets or things like those, if they're not produced in mass, and in many cases they aren't, then you might be able to blow basically into a molten heap of glass. So when glass is just created and it's still super, super hot, you can actually mold it before it cools off, and it will take the shape of the element that you create, but doing so in a way that's like well done, and you create an item that's not going to break easily, an item that is uniform. It requires a lot of skill. This is especially true for like the small adornments, crafts kind of things, more than things that can be done in a more factory level for mass production, that kind of thing. With that said, this could be very useful for people who really like becoming better and better at a craft. And the better you are, the better your product will be, the more accolades you will get, and the more you'll be able to charge as well. Number 4, testers of all kinds. Video game testers, food testers, wine testers, furniture and experiences testers, IT testers, all kinds of testers. Wait, so I can actually get paid to play video games, and I can get paid to like eat ice cream and chocolate all day? Yep, you can. And why is that? Well, in today's day and age, we live in a service-based economy. In fact, in most developed countries, 3/4 of the economy, or 75% of the economy, is mostly service-based. What does this mean? It means that people deliver, basically they do something for someone else. They produce a work product that needs to be satisfactory. For that work product to do what it's intended, you need to check for the quality of it, right? So how do you check that, for example, if you have a hotel, that the experience that you're giving to your customers is something that's going to work? For example, if you buy new furniture, how do you know that that space is actually something that people will enjoy? Well, you have to test it. Similar with video games, right? Like you don't, or a software. You don't want to have too many bugs in it once you deliver it to the customer. So you're probably going to have professional people test it for quality before you even release the product or services. A service in this case, right? So that's what a tester does. So it might sound like, oh, it's super great, I get to do everything I do for fun, but when you do it every day, and it's basically with a mindset of like, I gotta find what's wrong to fix it, and there's probably a lot of wrong when you begin with it, it can get less fun. But that doesn't mean you cannot try it. At the end of the day, you are trying new flavors, new games, new everything, and if you really enjoy that area, this is something that can be great for you. And one disclaimer here is that you don't have to get too pigeonholed. This is as like anything that you think of, a product or service, that's probably going to need to be tested. So It's very likely that someone in the company is already doing that, and in many cases, they may actually need people who have the specific role of tester, like in the examples that I just mentioned. So comment below if you know of something that's very unique, or another job that has to do with testing, for example, that you think might be very cool and we haven't mentioned yet. Number 5, private investigators. Basically, they do all kinds of research for private clientele in terms of, it can go from affairs to background checks to things that have to do with potential crimes, anything that needs investigations. And it's just basically a client, like maybe you, someone else, another person, and not like a public institution or something like that. That's what a private investigator does. Now, I know many of you might think, oh, but private investigators are very mainstream. Like they appear in all sorts of superhero movies, cartoons, like even on this investigation shows, right? Like, oh, we have like a personal investigator doing this and that. Yeah, I will agree with you. It is relatively mainstream, but it is pretty unique in the sense that it is one of those few jobs that really let a person who's very interested in doing research and investigating and like uncovering mysteries and discovering stuff do so with a lot of freedom. So long as they're not breaking the law, they have a lot of freedom to basically do what they do, which is get to the bottom of the matter and find out what's really going on. And I think that's great because in other areas of research, for example, if you're doing academic research like PhDs, like people with PhDs do, like people in academia or people within a company, they usually have a lot more constraints with regards to their approach and what they do in order to get the information that they need to get. It's usually very narrow, super narrow. In this case, yes, it's also narrow, but the approach you use can vary a lot depending on the occasion, the type of person. Maybe you have to investigate someone who stole some money and had to go to went to a different country. I've actually seen documentaries of private investigators who do that. They pursue a criminal across the world looking for clues and stuff like that. Now, that sounds glamorous. It's probably more dangerous than it sounds, but it really is quite a unique profession. Number 6, airline dispatchers and coordinators. Well, if you think helping to coordinate takeoffs and landings in an airport is an important job, you're probably right. I know of people who've gotten into it. It pays very well. It doesn't really require that much in terms of learning. I believe it's just, to get certified, you got to take like 2 years of education or so. But it pays very well. And the one disadvantage with it, though, is that a single mistake can be very massively deadly, and it is a very high stress, very high focused kind of occupation. So if you're the kind of person who does well under pressure, and this sounds like something that might interest you, that you like looking at a screen all day and yelling like, hey, you can take off, you can, like wait in line, do this, do that, and you believe you can do it with a very high level, airplanes and airports are things that really excite you and you feel like you could do this, well, you could look more into it. Number 7, cemetery services and funeral services. So basically, death is a recession-proof business. What does this mean? As long as there are people will continue to die until they find the the immortality elixir or so, right? So as long as people die, people will need funeral services or services in which we go to a cemetery, right? Or we get to see the person, or I don't know. There are even events that are done on cemeteries that don't have anything to do with funerals either. So this might be something like an industry that you might be interested in the sense of, okay, like people can actually make good incomes from it. And if you don't feel bad about like always being around people who may be mourning, depending on the job actually, but that's basically the industry, right? So if you don't feel bad about doing that, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, there's no issue with doing so. You'll probably get in here anyways. You'll get accustomed to it, so it won't be an issue as you continue. But yeah, that's a very interesting field to go into. You could be potentially a director of a funerals service, a funeral company, or you could be someone who plans events that take place in cemeteries or stuff like that, and that can be very useful. I mean, it's similar to doing it in other venues, and it could potentially be very profitable as well. So there are many potential occupations that can fit into the description of unique, but I'm gonna go with only one last one, and that's number 8, building your own business or personal brand. Now, why is this unique? Well, if you're building it of your own personal brand, like for example, some YouTubers or people on social media whom you know by their names, then it's likely that that is a very unique business in the sense that the people who buy from them mostly buy because they're buying from that person that they like, that they believe in, whose advice they find valuable, more so than just the product or service itself. So maybe it's a service that's very similar, or it's better in very marginal ways, but they prefer to buy from this person than from the other one simply because they believe in this person. Because they've seen a lot of their content. That's something very powerful as well, like if you do a personal brand business, especially if it's online. So why is this so unique? Again, like even someone could come in and do exactly what you're doing, but their delivery is unlikely to be the same. And because you're putting your personal brand in it, like many famous people do, that means that some people will like you, some people will hate you. A really good example of that is Donald Trump. A lot of people hate him, a lot of people, some people like him. So it's very divisive. And this is actually a good thing in the sense that it makes it so that the people who like you really like you, and the people who hate you, they really hate you. And maybe they are always in the comment section if you're a YouTuber or someone who's online. And or maybe they just don't buy from you or never watch your videos again because you pissed them off. And that's okay, that's perfect. Because that means that you are unique, your business is unique because it has your brand, and therefore it'll be easier to differentiate yourself out there in the marketplace. Also, you got a lot of leeway when it comes to what exactly do you do? Like, how do you structure your day? Do you like working more in the mornings, on the afternoons, on the evenings? How do you go about doing projects? Do you prefer to stay where you are right now? Do you want to grow? If you want to grow, how far and how fast? What do you want to do with the projects? What do you choose to focus on? Do you hire other people? Do you not? And even when it comes to your offering, obviously, what you do has to be something that your customers and your audience enjoys and what they like, obviously. But so long as you keep doing that, you have a lot of options. You could potentially offer physical products, like, I don't know, like crafts again, maybe having an Etsy store, maybe creating something else, like a painting or anything like that if you're that kind of artist, and selling it online. Or even like information products, classes, educational courses, coaching, consulting. There's a whole world out there, and you have a lot of flexibility when you do your own business based on a personal brand, which is very flexible and it's very unique. So now you know some unique occupations you can pursue. If there's any particular occupation or anything in this video that you would like me to go more in depth, or if you have another question, make sure to ask that in the comments section below. Also, if you like this video, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know whenever a new video comes out.